Okay, so at this point, I got the epidural, and what that felt like was just warmth rushing down my back into my legs. And I laid down flat, and it was getting annoying at some points because I would. You can't lay on your back flat, I guess, because you're putting pressure on that main artery to your baby. So they have you kind of lay on the side, either side. So I was kind of having to lay on my side, and then one leg would go completely numb, and the other one would be totally fine, and that would freak me out. Just the feeling would freak me out, and I'd be like, "Oh my God, I don't want to feel any more contractions." Ah. So I kept having them come in, and they would rotate me, or I would rotate myself. It's really hard to move when you're numb down there. I had to have help every time. Oh, and I farted a couple times. You can't help it. You can't hold it back or anything. And it was kind of embarrassing. My stepmom and mom were in there, and they were like, I'm like, I can't help it. I'm sorry. I don't know. So, um, sorry if that's TMI, but that happened. Um, so, where am I? So after my epidural was in, and it was in, and I had a couple, had it refilled or whatever, the anesthesiologist woman came in and she put more into the IV, which felt amazing every time because it was like a reload, and like the warmth would come back and it would take the edge off, and I'd be like, oh my God. But it was completely different than what I expected. I thought I was just going to be like this numb vegetable in the bed, not feeling a thing, just twiddling my thumbs, not doing any work. But it was like totally still labor pains in labor. Felt it. It just wasn't as painful. I don't know. It was weird, and I could totally still feel my body. It wasn't like I was some stump, but it was hard to move. And there was times where I was completely numb on one leg, which I didn't like that complete numb feeling. So after my water broke, I got my IV. Maybe a couple hours later, the doctor came in and he checked me, and I was about 6 to 7 centimeters. And at that point, 3 hours later, they came back and checked me, and I was still at 6 to 7 centimeters, and my contractions were still 5 minutes apart. So at that point, they decided to put me on Pitocin, and I was like pissed off, but gosh, at that point, I was in labor for over 12 hours or more. So I was like, fine, whatever. They kept reassuring me, and they were kind of annoyed at how concerned I was, but they kept reassuring me that nothing they were going to give me was going to harm the baby, and it was all safe and fine. So they gave me some Pitocin, or they started me on Pitocin at like probably at like 10 in the morning. So I've been in labor a long, long time at this point, and I still had the epidural going. Then I'm gonna say at like 12, 11:30, 12. No, 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 no. I guess it was really close to when actually she was delivered. Sorry, brain fart. So the doctor came in at around probably 2:30, and he checked me, and he said she's 10 and then some, ready to push. I guess I was so dilated, I was more than 10, and I was ready to go. So that Pitocin really kicked stuff up. And after I was on the Pitocin, that is when my contractions did start to get closer together. So they were like 2.5 minutes apart at this time. And another thing that happened, which was, I guess, a sign that I was close, really suddenly and out of nowhere, I started shivering, like chattering teeth and just shivering, shivering, shivering. And they said that's a sign that you're getting close for the pushing stage. I thought it was a side effect of the epidural, but it's not. It's like that can happen to your body when your body's ready to push. And at this point, I was feeling everything. The epidural completely wore off, and my contractions were so strong, it felt like my butt was going to blow off of my body. There is so much rectal pressure and so much pressure down there that it's insane, and it's so weird that it's all rectal. And even when you're pushing, you feel like you're pushing out something out of your butt. They tell you to push like you're having a bowel movement. And so anyways, my contractions were so bad. I didn't even think to ask for another round of the epidural because I knew it was going to be too close. They wouldn't allow it anyway. So I just bared down, and I pushed for about 45 minutes, and I had to push with all the contractions I was having. And once they had me start pushing, I guess I moved the baby down with a couple contractions. that it got to the point where I couldn't help push. I couldn't stop pushing. Like my body was naturally pushing, whether I liked it or not. So I think I pushed for like through like 5 or 6 contractions. It was about 45 minutes, and I pushed with all of my might. I sounded like a screaming cow. I was totally loud and totally obnoxiously in hysterical pain. I didn't think it would be like that, but it was like the movies, and I was screaming my head off and crying and moaning and making these crazy weird seawater animal fat cow noises. It was so painful. It was the most painful thing I've ever experienced. I never thought a human being could experience a pain level that high. And it basically felt like I was gonna poop out a huge thing out of my butthole. That's what the birthing experience felt like for me. And it was so painful. They asked me while I was pushing if I wanted her to be put on my chest, and I said yes. And I felt like when her head came out, I knew her head came out. I felt everything. I felt her head slowly be pushed out of me. And the doctor was like, okay, stop pushing. I have to suction out her nose and her mouth. And I was like, I can't stop pushing. I really couldn't stop. He's like, okay. And I'm like squirming around. And then I felt her shoulders come out, and then she just, right after those shoulders, they really do just like slide out, and I felt this release of so much, like in my stomach, like where she came out of, like I felt empty all of a sudden, and the pain pretty much went away. He suctioned at her mouth. My stepmom cut the belly button cord, umbilical cord, and then they put her on my belly, and I just was crying. I was so exhausted and so happy and so many emotions all at once. And she was on my belly, and I just remember looking down at her and holding her and she was so warm and moist still, and it was amazing. I was still, it's not true when they tell you all the pain just goes away, at least for me. Yeah, I'm overwhelmed with so much joy, but the pain was still there. And immediately after she was born, and I had her, and I was crying and still in pain and couldn't believe what I just did. It was the coolest thing, craziest thing ever. Sorry, I have to make another part 4.